It is Wednesday, August 14th. I'm Bernice Hillier, and this is The Signal on CBC Radio 1. I'm filling in for Adam Walsh. Today, our topic is insects. We have some bug experts, entomologists, joining us on the program. We're live on location at the Center for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook. And because we are live on location, we won't be taking your calls live on the show today on the air, but we want your questions about insects, so you can get in touch with us in a number of ways. You can text us, email us, or you can call in, and our associate producer, Amanda Gear in St. John's, will pass along your questions and be sure to get those to our experts today. The number to send a text is 709-327-8206. Send us an email at thesignal@cbc.ca. And if you want to pass along your question by calling directly, the number is 1-800-563-8255, and Amanda will be sure that I get that question to our guests. Now, we have some of the leading bug experts from Eastern Canada with us in Corner Brook this week in the coming days, and that's because the Acadian Entomological Society is holding its annual meeting and AGM here at the Center for Research and Innovation. The first person you're going to hear from will be with us throughout the program. Joe Bowden is an entomologist based in Corner Brook. He is a research scientist with Natural Resources Canada. Hello, Joe.
Good afternoon, Bernice. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for allowing me to come along to your conference.
Yeah, no problem. You're quite welcome. It's very exciting. I guess you could say I'm buzzing.
Oh, dear. We're going to be hearing lots of those expressions, I think, throughout the show. Tell me, Joe, bugs may not be everyone's, thing. What got you interested in bugs?
Oh, I'm going to use another one. I've been really excited about bugs since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I've been collecting bugs. I spent a lot of my life hanging out in the forest, collecting all kinds of things from, frogs and things like that to insects. And at some point in university, I just got something just clicked, and I was like, wow, these things are fascinating. They're so diverse, and they're doing all kinds of really important things for us around the world. And I just got really excited about them. So the importance of bugs, if you can speak to that, why are bugs important? So bugs are so important for things like pollination services. That's an obvious one. I think we see bees and flies and butterflies and things around us that are providing pollination services for the fruits that we eat, and for a lot of the flowers and things like that out there that forests and that are in forests and things like that, or in meadows. They're also breaking down organic material. So when the leaves fall off of trees in the fall, insects help break them down and turn them back into soils. Insects are an important food source for migratory birds and bats and many other insects out there. They also help regulate pest populations out there. So we've got spiders and wasps and flies out there that are natural enemies of these things, and helping to keep those populations low and help us regulate those pests from getting to turning into outbreaks. I'm sure it's no surprise to you when I say many of us are squeamish around bugs. Do you ever feel that way? Did you ever feel that way? I don't think so. I've handled a few spiders that were, somewhat venomous, like black widows and things like that, in the past that, raised the hairs on the back of my neck a little bit, I guess. But I know that, if I'm not hurting them, they're generally not going to try to hurt me. So, no, I've never really been sort of anxious about it. I don't have entomophobia. So, There you go. Yeah. Didn't even know that was a word. Yeah. So what is the biggest misconception, would you say, about insects? I think one big thing that we see quite often is this idea that insects are sort of out to get people and to hurt you. So one thing that comes to mind is this white-spotted sawyer. So there's a longhorn beetle that we get a lot of images posted on sort of Insects of Newfoundland Facebook group, for example, where some folks suggest that they do have a nasty bite. And if you pick them up, they might bite you because these things chew through wood, and they're adapted to bore into wood and eat wood. And so if you do, aggressively pick them up or make them angry, then it's best in the end to sort of observe insects from far away. But yeah, hold for things like mosquitoes and black flies and stouts that are out to get you. Most things are not out to hurt you. So.
Okay. We've said there are a lot of bug experts, entomologists in Corner Brook this week. Why are they here? What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so it's super exciting. This is the 81st gathering of the annual Entomological Acadian Entomological Society. So this is all of the folks from Atlantic Canada in this insect society, and it's a lot of researchers, so government researchers, academics, many students that are gathering here to present the latest and greatest on the research that we do in Atlantic Canada on insects. And we've invited a guest speaker from Montreal as well. It's very exciting to have the director of the Insectarium in Montreal here to be our plenary tomorrow morning. We have some very exciting public things going on as well. So we're got a lot of insect experts here. So it's a great chance that we can share our knowledge and expertise with folks that, like we're doing here, but also there's a public talk later today at 3:30 with Tom Chapman. It's a very interesting and I think animated talk. He's going to talk about a historian, a natural historian that focused on insects back in the Victorian era from the UK, and he does a little bit of dress up, so there's some interesting stuff for the kids. On Saturday morning at 10 a.m., we're also going to meet in Margaret Bowater Park, and there's an opportunity to bring your kids out, and we can collect bugs and talk about the importance of insects as well out there as well. And yeah. Super exciting.
I want to give the time again. So 3 or 3:30 this afternoon.
3:30 this afternoon.
For Tom Chapman's talk, the general public can show up to that, and it's at the Centre for Research and Innovation here, which is near Corner Brook Pulp and Paper. You probably know the building. It used to be, I guess, the Human Resources building primarily for Corner Brook Pulp and Paper, and before that for Bowater. You are listening to The Signal on CBC Radio 1. We're talking about insects today, the creepy crawly kind, as well as bugs that fly. The Signal is live on location from the Centre for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook. And if you have a question about insects, get in touch with us. You can text us 709-327-8206. You can send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. Well, Joe, I have some questions for you that were sent in to me by social media, so I'll start with those, and we'll see if we get any more questions to add to our list before we get to some of our other guests. You mentioned Max Larrivé, who is with the Montreal Insectarium. He's going to be with us a little bit later in this half hour. So here are a few questions that have already come into us. Toby Lucas of Stephenville says, what are the best tips for photographing insects, as in luring them and hopefully slowing them down or getting them to pitch, such as dragonflies?
This is a very good question, and I think Max might be able to elaborate on that a little bit later. He's much more of an insect photographer than I am, but I think my biggest tip in photographing insects is to start taking photos as soon as they land, for example, on a flower, butterflies, bees, that sort of thing. As soon as they land, try to start taking photos far away and gradually get closer to them and taking photos. Stay low to the ground. And a lot of these things have very good eyesight, actually. There's some things. We were taking pictures of tiger beetles here down a trail yesterday, and these guys have very good eyesight. So they're predators. They have these big jaws that hunt things on the go. And it's very important to sort of stay low, be very patient. Be patient.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We had a question from Donna Van de Velde, and she talked about, is it fact or fiction that mosquitoes are attracted to people after they eat certain foods, after the people eat certain foods?
That's a very good question. And so I feel like I'm probably eating all the wrong foods because mosquitoes are on me anyway.
All the time.
Use the expression all the time, yeah. So there is some evidence in recent years, actually, that suggests things like bananas. Eating bananas might actually, they found statistically that in a study that after eating bananas, mosquitoes were more attracted to folks than those that didn't eat bananas. So there are things, mosquitoes and black flies and stouts and things like that use mechanical cues So in their antenna, they have mechanoreceptors, chemoreceptors, that they can, and olfactory receptors. So they basically can smell and hear you all in their antennae, and they use, especially these chemoreceptors, so the odors that we emit. So things like CO2, we breathe CO2, they're attracted to CO2. This is what a lot of the bug zapper machines will shoot out CO2 and attract insects. A lot of the odors that we emit, so they can smell us just as any other animals can smell. They can smell you.
All right, so bananas are now off my list of foods in my diet for sure.
Maybe if you're going to go out in the woods.
Donna has another question, and obviously a lot of times people have questions about insects that have to do with controlling their impact on humans. So another question from Donna is there any repellent that actually works against the ticks that carry Lyme disease?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So actually there are some researchers coming to this very meeting that are currently working on some botanicals and understanding some botanicals that might help deter things like ticks or mosquitoes from feeding on us. So there was a paper that came out of a group from Dalhousie and Acadia just last year or the year before, suggesting that balsam fir might have some extracts that actually deter these insects from wanting to bite you. So there's something there's something there potentially, but also there is some other botanicals like things from the Asteraceae, the daisies, extracts from daisies that they've shown can reduce feeding by insects. Then there's also some of these chemical things that we know are proven. So DEET, some of those things you can get out at shops. So DEET and things like that. And there's also you can even get permethrin is another chemical insecticide that you can actually buy permethrin studded clothing. Pants and shirts and things like that. If you're going to spend a lot of time around, and especially on the mainland in really tick-heavy areas, this is something that folks use.
All right. We've been asking Joe Bowden some questions today about insects that have been sent to us on social media, but we are looking for your questions as well. So if you have those, get them to us, and we will ask the experts that we have on our show today. You can text your question to the Signal, 709-327-8206. You can also send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. And if you want to call in and just pass along your question to our associate producer, Amanda, who will just jot them down and send them along to me live on location here. The number to call to reach Amanda is 1-800-563-8255. And Joe, I asked some fantastic and curious young people to help me out with some questions for you today, because children have this natural curiosity that many grown-ups have lost, apparently. I think I count myself among those who probably aren't as curious about bugs as I used to be. So we're going to play one of those clips for you now and see if you can answer their tough questions. So here is the first clip.
Hi, my name is Peyton Osmond, and I'm 12 years old, and I'm wondering what is the rarest bug?
All right, Peyton wants to know, what is the rarest bug?
That is a very good question. And I got to say, I love giving talks about bugs to kids because you get the most interesting questions, things that I would never think of to ask myself, but it's very interesting stuff. And so, yeah, Peyton, very good question. I think probably the most rarest insect is the one we don't know yet. There are some very rare species out there globally. Many things we still have yet to detect, even in regions like Newfoundland and Labrador. And so I think probably the rarest one is the one we haven't. I think it's probably the one we haven't found yet. That's
really interesting, because one of the questions that had come in on my social media was related to finding a rare bug, a bug that has never been found before, I guess, and having it named, selecting the name for that bug. So does that still happen?
It happens all of the time. Yep. So there's one of my favorite cartoonists is Gary Larson, and he did a lot of ecology and natural history cartoons and a lot of bug cartoons on calendars and things. And there's a louse species named after him that actually parasitizes owls, but it's called Strigophilus gary larsoni, and I thought that was pretty cool.
That is very cool. I remember hearing about that. And so, Joe, now I have to ask you, do you aspire to have a bug named after you?
I think it would be cool.
It would be cool, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think you have a much better chance of having a bug named after you than I do. So you'll have to, that'll be a story for a future show.
Sure.
We have another clip for you now, and this one's from a boy who's been thinking about what happens to bugs when it rains and there's an awful lot of water everywhere. So here's that clip.
Hi, my name's Niall Tierney, and I'm 7 years old. And the thing I really want to know about bugs is, do they drown?
Thanks to Niall for his question. Niall wants to know, do bugs drown?
So I won't. Okay, I'll try not. I'll try to keep some details and not get into too much detail. But the simple answer is sort of. So they have what we call open circulatory systems. So they're different than us as mammals, where we have lungs, and if our lungs fill with water, we would drown. Insects have these open circulatory systems, so if you do submerge them in water for a long period of time, they would basically suffocate, and yes, they would die. So they could functionally sort of drown. But the nice thing about bugs, I guess, for them is that some are aquatic, and so some bugs even have gills and can live at aquatic life stages. So early on, mayflies and things like that live, and mosquitoes and things have gills basically as larvae, and they can breathe underwater. Other insects that are out there flying around that happen to fall in water often are very covered in hairs, and so these hairs help keep the surface tension between the water, so they don't necessarily go under. There's all kinds of unique adaptations I don't want to get into. There's a diving bell spider that's really cool that takes a pocket of air in its abdomen so it can breathe underwater.
Cool.
But in a lot of our insect trapping, when we use water, we'll use a bit of soap, which is a surfactant, and that helps sort of break the surface tension. So if an insect lands in the water, it will fall down, and it will drown. So basically, yes, they can.
There was so much that you could say in response to Niall's question.
Yeah, Niall, that was a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have one more clip, so we'll play that now from a curious kid who we have.
Hi, I'm Zoe Osmond, and I'm 11 years old, and my question is, what is the most deadliest insect in Newfoundland?
And so the question from Zoe Osmond is, what is the most deadly insect we have in Newfoundland?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. And the wonderful thing about living where we live is that there are no deadly insects.
I was hoping you'd say that,
yes.
Joe. So
hold for the chance that you're allergic to, to bees, or allergic to wasp stings or something like that. There's no quote unquote deadly insects in Newfoundland. So that's one fantastic thing about another one of the many things about living here that's fantastic, right? So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to Zoe and to Niall and to Peyton for those questions. And obviously, I think you got our expert today thinking because of those interesting questions you put to us. I have a couple of things that have come in via text, so I want to get to those questions. And Joe, maybe then we'll get our guest, Max Larive of the Montreal Insectarium, to join us. But here's a question we received by text to the Signal. Do we have poisonous spiders in Newfoundland and Labrador? I like spiders, and wondered if a little round body spider is poisonous.
I love that question because I worked on spiders for about 10 years. So the short answer is, again, well, technically all spiders have venom. So all spiders have venom glands. We have no dangerous spiders here. And again, unless you happen to be allergic to the proteins of a spider bite, it's not going to hurt you. A lot of even if you did get bitten by a spider, researchers have shown that a lot of bites are in defense, and it's very physiologically costly for them to produce these proteins or venoms, and so a lot of bites are just dry bites as well. So it's just like, stay away from me or whatever, don't step on me, kind of bite. And so there's I'll try to keep this short, but it's the the gist of this is that there are no dangerous spiders here, and so that's a frequent question on the Insects of Newfoundland Facebook group too. I think
is it okay? So a lot of us are wondering about that.
And arachnophobia is very common, of course, and I get it, but
And what did you say the term is for more general fear of insects?
Entomophobia.
Entomophobia. Yeah. Boy. So we had another question come in. I know this is something that you and I chatted about briefly on the phone yesterday, so I'll read this. It came in by text. In the last 2 years, for the first time we have ever seen in all of central Newfoundland and Labrador, caterpillar nets. It started in a small sector by the Gander Airport 2 years ago. Now, if you drive the Gander Loop Road, these caterpillar nets, is what this person's calling them, have taken over, and these are now killing and decimating all the deciduous trees. Each year they are increasing at a crazy rate. Why are they now in Newfoundland, and what can be done to control them? If not controlled, what could be the results? That question from Fred on text.
Yeah, very good question. So this insect you're speaking of is the fall webworm, or what we would call, or what Linnaeus would have called Hyphanthria cunea. And it is not a tent caterpillar. That's a very common sort of misnomer, I guess. There are tent caterpillars in eastern Canada, but I've been spending 9-10 years in the woods here in working on insects in the forest, and I've yet to see tent caterpillars. But they do make tents, and they're very conspicuous. And people get very concerned about them, especially when they're in your ornamental in your yard. And so these are they're widespread, and so it is a native species, but we find them right across the island. And I got an email from a colleague at our office in Sault Ste. Marie just the other day. There was a gentleman from Fogo Island, I believe, that was asking about these. They were covering some trees in his property, I think. And so we're getting lots of questions. We get lots of questions about these. The last couple of years, they've been particularly abundant. And the nice thing is that they're not known to cause mortality of the tree. So they're not known to kill trees. And they are very conspicuous. You can remove them if they're on your prized ornamental. You can remove. You may not want to remove a branch of your prized ornamental, but you can remove branches that they're in. And there are other bioinsecticides and things you could treat them with. But for all intents and purposes, I would just leave them. We know that they don't kill trees, mostly because the feeding is so late in the year. The trees are starting to shut down soon, too. So they don't result in mortality of the trees, generally.
So a tree that seems to be infested this year won't necessarily have them next year?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's good to know. I hope that answers the question for Fred. Joe, we're going to get you to introduce someone to our listeners now that you've invited to speak at this week's meeting of the Acadian Entomological Society, and then we're going to get you guys to kind of switch out seats there. But great. First of all, tell us who we're going to be hearing from and why you invited him.
Yeah, great. So I've known Dr. Maxime Larivé for almost 20 years now. We overlapped during our PhD work at McGill, actually. And Max has done some just fantastic work on community science projects over the last years, and he's and just some very globally known projects now that he's been involved with, and I'll let him talk about those. But I just thought and he's also the director of the Insectarium in Montreal, and we're going to go visit the Newfoundland Insectarium on Friday as well too. So.
Awesome.
But it's been he does some fantastic insect work, and I just thought it would be very exciting for folks here in this region to see him give a presentation. So he's going to give the plenary talk at our formal session tomorrow morning. Very exciting for him to be here.
Well, we're going to ask you to come back, Joe, but right now we're going to get Max Larivé into your seat there. And while we're doing that and making that switch, I'll remind our listeners that the signal is coming to you from the Center for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook today. We're talking about insects, and it's because the Acadian Entomological Society is holding their annual meeting and AGM here in Corner Brook this week. And there are some public events coming up. Joe mentioned those earlier, and we'll have an opportunity to remind you about opportunities for your family to come and learn more about bugs from all of these experts who are with us. But we've got Maxime now in place, the director of the Montreal Insectarium. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, Joe tells me you're a butterfly expert, so I have to ask you what I asked Joe. What is it that got you interested in butterflies way back when?
I've been interested in butterflies as far as I can remember. My mom used to tell me that by the time I was 3 years old, I had a butterfly collection. I knew like 32 species of butterflies in French, English, and Latin. And so I guess I've been a child for my whole life, chasing butterflies.
My goodness. Well, if anyone has butterfly questions, now's the time to text those to us or send us an email. So I'll give the number, 709-327-8206, or you can send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. And I want to come back to something that I'd asked Joe, but he said, you're really the guy to ask about photographing insects.
Yes.
How do you do it?
So the number one thing is patience. And somehow, believe it or not all insects are the same, and you will find insects that you could get closer to. And as Joe was mentioning, the number one thing is take a picture from a distance first. And we'll focus on butterflies, for example. If you flush a butterfly and it starts flying, don't walk towards it. Wait until it lands. Once it lands, approach it from behind if you want, or from the side. Make sure you don't cast a shadow on it if it's sunny. And as you get closer, try to get perpendicular to the butterfly so that you can have a photo that'll be more in focus. Those are really the keys. And I'm a big guy, right? And my goal is always to make myself as small as possible as I get close to the butterflies I'm trying to photograph. And that'll make a big difference.
Okay, good to know that. And I know Toby Lucas, who sent us that question from Stephenville, is a photographer himself, just generally, and obviously looking for some advice on how to photograph insects. Now, I want to ask you, I understand you started an international butterfly monitoring program. So, Maxime, tell us a bit about that and about how people, who are listening today can get involved.
Actually, yeah, so we launched a program called eButterfly, which is now global, and no later than this spring, we put out a mobile app that people can download on the App Store for Apple and on the Play Store for Android. And this mobile app also has an AI-assisted tool where you can upload a photograph of any butterfly in Canada. And, even if the photograph's a bit blurry, it should be able to identify it to species, especially if you follow the tricks that we just shared with you. And then you can share these observations on and they go into our database, and then scientists around the world, because this is openly accessible, use this to understand how what we call global change, so climate change, habitat destruction, how land changes and everything affects butterfly biodiversity, but biodiversity as a whole, so that we can make more informed decisions for conservation.
So, Max, I just want to remind people what the name of it is. eButterfly?
Yes,
That's what they would
eButterfly.
look for in their app store.
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know. We hear a lot about species that are threatened or at risk. How are butterfly populations doing worldwide?
Not great. To be honest, there was a report from the United Nations that was published about 4 years ago that was showing that one species out of 8 in the world of any living thing is at risk of extinction in the next century. And for insects and butterflies, what we're noticing is that there's something called the biodiversity insect collapse, and their biodiversity is diminishing at an alarming rate, at an unprecedented rate that has never been seen in history in the last 10 million years, for example. So this is also why we want to understand what are we'll call them the drivers that are responsible for that, so that we can make better informed decisions. Because as Joe was mentioning, pollinators are butterflies and moths are responsible for over 40% of all pollination of our fruits, our vegetables. They're essential also as the pantry for anything in boreal forest and other forests, right, as a food source. And somehow, believe it or not, when they're not acting as a pest, they stimulate growth for plants when they're chewing the leaves in some cases. So they play many very important roles, and we sure hope that we can learn to coexist better with them sustainably.
For sure. Max, obviously this is a real priority for you to get people involved in making observations to aid in scientific research. How did that come about that scientists now, and maybe they always did, feel that everyone should be involved in observing nature and contributing to scientific research?
Yeah, so the time is now, right, for people, because the challenges that we're facing with biodiversity are bigger than any scientist can tackle. They're happening globally at, like I mentioned, at a speed that is unprecedented, and we need help from everyone. And we have the tools now with the internet and with our cell phones to have projects that can document in near real time now biodiversity across the globe. And with the internet and with databases, our scientists have access openly with these kind of projects, community science projects, to this information, and can act rapidly.
I'm going to get our reporter Amy Fian, who is here with me, to come and actually pass you something, or maybe Joe can do it. Some photos that I'd sent to Joe, and he looked at them, and he certainly knows what they are, but he said you might be the better person to actually speak to them. So these were sent to the Signal by another CBC employee, so producer Todd O'Brien, and honestly, I have to confess that when I saw them, I wondered if he was pulling my leg. Because they have these eyes that almost look cartoonish. Yeah. I posted it on my Facebook if anyone wants to look it up on Facebook and see what we're talking about here. But Max, maybe you can describe what we're seeing, and then you can tell us that it is for real. It is for real. So what we're seeing is a caterpillar of a Canadian tiger swallowtail. And swallowtail caterpillars are known to have these fake eyes near the head that actually imitate some kind of snake, right? And it is for them to scare away birds that might be interested in eating them or something. And the imitation is perfect. So it's fascinating to see this. And it's something that's really common, especially for caterpillars, because they're very vulnerable, right? So they use all these kind of tricks, fake eyes, looking sometimes like a viper, even, and swallowtails, like the Canadian tiger swallowtail. It's a great example of that. And so this particular insect will become a butterfly? It'll become an amazing butterfly that most people in Newfoundland can see in late June and all through July. It's a large yellow with black stripe butterfly called the tiger swallowtail. Amazing. Yes. Max, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your expertise, and we're glad to have you here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Great pleasure. That's Maxime Larive, director of the Montreal Insectarium. He is guest speaker at the annual meeting this week in Corner Brook of the Acadian Entomological Society. And this is a great time for you to get your bug questions answered. So you can get them to us by texting. The number to do that is 709-327-8206. You can send us an email as well, thesignal@cbc.ca. And if you want to pass along your question by calling directly, we're not taking calls live on the air this afternoon, but we have had some questions come in. So the number, if you want to call and pass along your question to our associate producer Amanda Gear, the number to call 1-800-563-8255, and Amanda will be sure that I get that question to one of our guests. Now, we've been saying today that we are broadcasting live from the Center for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook. If you're wondering what the Center for Research and Innovation is, I think it's safe to say that we're going to be hearing a lot more about things that are happening at this location and the work that's going to come out of this location as the months and the years go by. But for today, I wanted to take just a few minutes away from our topic of insects so we can find out briefly what this center is. I'm joined by Diana Chisel, Events Administrator at the Center for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook. Good afternoon, Diana.
Hi, Bernice. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come and to broadcast the Signal today on CBC Radio. What is this place?
The space is an amazing collaboration between Corner Brook Pulp and Paper, Grenfell Campus Memorial University, and the College of the North Atlantic. We're very fortunate to be in the space. We host a variety of things, including the conference that's here today. We're really excited to share the space with our Center for Research Innovation Makerspace, as well as Navigate's Business Incubator. So in the building itself, we have some meeting rooms that are available. We have a co-working space. Navigate's incubator manager, Brennan Lowry, works out of this building. So if anyone is interested in starting up business, they can stop by and chat with Brennan. Along with that, we are really excited to dive into research and innovation around making and fabrication. So we have 2 maker spaces within the building, a fair amount of digital fabrication stuff, including 3D printers, laser cutters, scanners. We have a very cool TC2 digital loom. We also have a full wood shop and a metal shop, a small welding area in our downstairs space, an array of hand tools, drill presses. We have a lathe, a CNC router, and a plasma table. We currently are working on a membership structure, so members of the West Coast community can become members of the space and access all of the equipment that we have for making.
Yeah, we just heard Max Larive talk about the importance of community participation, average citizens being involved in scientific research. And I know your vision for this, the people who created the Center for Research and Innovation very much have that same sense of wanting it to be part of the community and having the community involved.
Absolutely. We are very much looking forward to the day when community members walk through the door constantly and say, hey, I want to make this, so that we can help them realize whatever it is that they're envisioning making. We have been doing a few demo days to host drop-ins so people can tour the space, see some of the equipment in action. A lot of that is with community partnerships. So recently we made large-scale outdoor games with CB Nui. We have been working on building some bike racks, but there's also been some very interesting research projects happening, including one that community members will be able to see and participate in during CB Nui, but is doing a test run this Friday at the Hue and Draw. It's a theater meets VR experience. That Friday iteration is sold out, but it is so very cool to see tech and software and design and theater come together in a very creative new way. And we couldn't be more excited that the space here allowed for all of those makers to come together.
Now, Diana, when people ask you where you are, just describe it so that people in the western region, but right across the province who might be visiting Corner Brook, will know exactly how they can find you.
Absolutely. Our address here is 3 Mill Road. We are located across Lewin Parkway from Corner Brook Pulp and Paper in what a lot of people on the West Coast will know as the Mill HR building. We are very happy that the Mill allows us to be here in this space. It's, in the heart of downtown. It's accessible via the walking trails, the stream trails, and we have a lot of parking and accessibility. The building is completely accessible, but we are the kind of big white building with all the windows across from the mill.
All right, Diana, thanks again for letting us come here to broadcast, and thanks for joining me for a few minutes.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's Diana Chisel, and she is the events administrator at the Center for Research and Innovation in Corner Brook. We are broadcasting live on location from the Center for Research and Innovation today. The Acadian Entomological Society is meeting here starting today, so this is a good place to get your questions to us about insects, and I know we have some more of those coming in. And right now we've got a guest who has just taken her seat. Julie Surcom is an associate professor of environmental science at Grenfell Campus Memorial University. And Julie, I want to welcome you to the program, first of all. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I am told that you will be able to handle all of our bee questions.
I will do my best.
So I have to start by asking you, what got you interested in bees?
It was sort of an accident, honestly. I mean, when I started out saying, I'm going to be a biologist, I was imagining, like Farley Mowat with the binoculars on the tundra watching wolves, and that's what I thought I would be doing. but there's a lot of competition to do that kind of research, and I just sort of fell into doing some work with some little shrimp-like things that live in mud flats, and one thing led to another, and one day I found myself working with bees. It was just an accident, and I couldn't be happier. You know, the wolves are very nice, but bees are awesome.
I want to ask you, I know we just heard from Max about butterfly populations, and we have heard in the past concerns around bee populations. How much of a worry is that for those who are really concerned about bees?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, and people get a couple different things sort of muddled. So most people, when they hear the word bee, they think honeybee. When you think honeybee, think like chickens, okay? They're livestock. They're not native. And I say this as an actual honeybee keeper. They are probably not the best thing for the native bees. So they're a managed species. And there was, about 10, 15 years ago, a lot of concern about honeybees because there was this mysterious colony collapse disorder. It was all over the news. There's still a lot of challenges for honeybees, but basically the honeybee population is fine. And we're very fortunate in Newfoundland that our honeybees are very, very healthy. We don't have this nasty varroa mite that you may have heard of. That actually carries a lot of diseases and helps those spread. We're very lucky not to have it, which is why there are regulations about not importing honeybees or bee equipment, so don't do that. So the honeybees, have those challenges, but they're doing fine. Native bees, not so much. They're suffering from all of the challenges that all of the other insects are suffering from. So climate change, habitat loss, all of that stuff. So I'm more concerned about our native bees, all of the little bumblebees and tiny solitary bees and that sort of thing.
And what can we do? What can all of us do to protect them?
Lots of stuff. I'm really so happy to see so many people embracing no mow May. That is fantastic. But of course now I want more. I want people to go beyond no mow May. Don't be in a rush to clean up piles of cut branches and crud in your flower beds in the spring. Leave those. There's little bees that are hibernating, and also butterflies and other stuff. All sorts of stuff hibernates in there. So leave that till it gets warm out. Try to encourage all sorts of flowering plants, especially native ones. Native plants are usually better. Our native bees are better adapted to feeding on them. So encourage those, especially to have things that are blooming all through the season, not just in May with the dandelions. And try not to use pesticides. There's all sorts of natural ways to deal with problems in your garden.
Julie, what tends to be the focus of your research?
Oh, I'm all over the map. I've done a fair bit with bumblebees, looking at how they use different habitats. I did a bunch of work where I was actually looking at their contribution to pollination of cranberry crops. Cranberry growers were fairly concerned that they needed supplemental pollinators, and I could demonstrate, to my satisfaction anyway, that our little native pollinators do great, at least at the scale of our cranberry fields in Newfoundland, because they're not massive, great big things, and our little tiny bees can do their thing.
Julie, what is it like for you, as someone who's so interested in bees, to be part of a conference, an annual meeting, an AGM that's coming up now this week of the Acadian Entomological Society?
Oh, I love this meeting. It's just great to be around a bunch of bug nerds and hear about all of the really interesting research. I mean, I love bees, obviously, but any of it is fascinating, and you get to hear all sorts of really neat research. I especially enjoy seeing the student presentations and posters, because these are our next generation coming up, and it's great to see the awesome work they're doing and get to encourage them as well.
Wonderful. Julie, thanks for taking a few minutes with us this afternoon.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having us.
That's Julie Surcom, Associate Professor of Environmental Science at Grenfell Campus, Memorial University. And we're into the last 10 minutes of our program today. We've got Joe Bowden once again taking the seat here. He's an entomologist. He's with the with Natural Resources Canada and a research scientist with them. And we've got a bunch more questions, Joe, so I want to get to those. If we can quickly kind of talk about some of these questions, these scenarios being posed to you. Mm-hmm. Dick Whitaker from Portugal Cove St. Philip says there are almost zero moths around this year and has noticed a decline for several years. Do any of your guests have any real reasons to say that might be happening? And also the number of butterflies seems to be down a lot as well.
That's a very good question. And so the simple answer is that we simply don't have the data to really say anything about that. I was telling one of your colleagues earlier that the best data we have is, as Max said, thanks to community scientists around the globe. And the best data set we know exists is out of the UK, where community scientists have been contributing to the knowledge of butterfly data and moths since the 70s. And so that's where we get really a lot of our long-term knowledge about the status of species, really, but yes, I mean, I work on moths quite a bit in the forest, and we know that, again, their physiology is driven by external temperatures and things like that. So warmer temperatures mean burning more energy, and that can mean sometimes you don't survive through a summer if it gets particularly warm. A lot of our species are adapted to cooler temperatures. That being said, on nights that it is cold, you won't see many things around because it just might be a little bit too cold for flying, and that's okay because they're probably just huddled down somewhere. But we know that climate change is definitely affecting a lot of our species that are adapted to these northern environments.
We had another question from someone who says, I discovered a giant leopard slug on our house siding. It had a long trail of amber-colored slime. What is it doing there instead of on the ground?
That's a good question. So, for one, I should say slugs are not insects. They are bugs, though I guess we use this general term bugs, and so that's fine. But I'm pretty certain that is an introduced species as well. But yeah, they can climb just as anything else, quite high. They feed on all kinds of different things like lichens and things in trees and things like that. So yeah, they can move around despite their sort of sluggish behavior. So I'm questioning now, and if you can give a simple answer to this, there probably isn't one. You say slugs are not insects. No. What are they? So. They're gastropods, so they are still invertebrates, and we would. So they're related to snails and things like that. They just don't have shells, and yeah. So all insects have 6 legs, and spiders have 8 legs, of course. And there's a lot of other invertebrate groups that are related that are. In this arthropod group, a terrestrial arthropod, so they have exoskeletons like spiders, insects, millipedes, centipedes.
There you go. We learned something new today. Slugs are not insects. We had an email from Jackie. So, Joe, I'll read this to you. Do you have any suggestions for me to try to convince people not to kill spiders? I try telling them that there are no poisonous spiders in Newfoundland and Labrador and that they eat flies. Yeah. That does not seem to convince those who feel they are doing the world a favor by using a can of Raid. I can understand that they may not want to make them feel welcome, but leave them alone. Yeah,
I completely agree with your sentiment and comments. I do the same. I think, spiders are, just like many insects, very important in our ecosystems. Again, they're helping. We did a study that we published last year showing, so we've got this budworm outbreak going on in the West Coast. We showed that actually 1 in every 3 spiders had recently fed upon a budworm in the forest. And that's just, we can only detect it, so we did this by DNA analysis, detecting budworm in the guts of spiders. So we could show that actually every 3rd spider had recently consumed a budworm. There's a lot of spiders out there, there's a lot of budworm out there. Again, they're helping to keep pest populations down. Spiders that make webs feed. I've got lots of pictures of when I'm out in the woods of black flies and mosquitoes that have been feeding on me, caught up in spider webs, and I'm just happy that they're there because they're helping me out. They're in our houses, many spiders, for a reason. There's other things that we probably don't want there that are eating our grains, eating our cat's food, our dog's food, that we probably don't want there, that the spiders are feeding on and helping us to control. So try to put that pair of glasses on in terms of looking at through the world, I guess.
See, now you've got me wondering, if I see spiders, what are they eating and what is in my house that I don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, all spiders here are predators, and so they're there feeding on other things. If they're in your house, they're eating other bugs that are there.
Okay. A couple of other topics that you and I had mentioned on the phone yesterday when we chatted was that you have had some inquiries about something eating birch trees in the Western Brook Gorge. So people have been noticing that. What's going on?
Yeah, so if you might recall, I think back around 2002 to 2007, there was an outbreak of a caterpillar called Elm Spanworm in St. John's that defoliated a lot of trees in the city area. We've been seeing localized outbreaks of this here on the West Coast in the last couple of years, which is a bit unusual. This thing, anecdotally, I don't want to jump into it's probably climate change, but it's probably climate change. We know that even native species are benefiting from, these pest species are benefiting from climate warming and the longer seasons that we have. So I've gotten a lot of questions, inquiries the last 2 years. Actually, we've had this Elm Spanworm outbreak in parts of Western Brook Gorge. Oh, it must be the budworm are eating the birches now. But we know that they're eating the firs and they're eating spruce trees. But budworm don't eat broadleaf trees or birches. So that is this elm spanworm. And so it is a typically very localized eruptive insect. So we're talking about tens of hectares. And this one, I think, is about 70 hectares in size, in which they're defoliating. So it does take a number of years of defoliation by this before trees start to die. But that's what's going on in Western Brook Gorge right now.
I did send you the photo of the Canadian tiger swallowtail. So we talked about that one with Max. We had also some photos sent to us by a colleague in Happy Valley Goose Bay who says that these bugs have been swarming Goose Bay, leading people to speculate about a bug infestation. Can we ask our bug expert on the show about it? So what are these? Maybe you can describe them first.
Absolutely. So this is a little shield bug. They're in this group called the true bugs. We call them the bugs. And so this is called Elasmuca lateralis, or the striped edge shield bug. And it is an insect that a lot of people might think is a stink bug. They're related to the stink bugs, but this one's not one of the stink bugs. They do feed on, as you show in the picture, birch leaves. And so I think if there is a localized sort of outbreak of these, it's a native species as well, I should say. But it probably, I would liken it to something like the March flies that we saw a couple of years ago. Big outbreak of those around 2020, 2021. We were talking about those quite a bit at that time. So, with some insects, and I was telling you earlier that, I've seen a lot of actually white admirals, this one particular butterfly species. So in some years, insects do well, and for whatever reason, climate and weather and things like that, and some years they don't do well. And so I think this just happens to be one of those years that they're doing well, that species in that region.
Okay, thank you for that. We don't have a lot of time left, but I wonder if in about 30 seconds or so you can talk about red ants. We did have a couple of questions about red ants being found in Corner Brook area, probably other parts of the province. This person wanted to know, are they domestic to the island, and what do you do to prepare for them? Yeah,
thanks. Just to jump back to the shield bug, I should say that often doesn't result in the trees being killed, so that they don't kill trees either.
So the striped edge shield bug showing up in Happy Valley Goose Bay, not a concern in that regard.
Exactly. So the red ants, yes. So we do have a couple of established spots of European red ants, is what I understand. I'm not an ant expert, but around some of the ports that we have around the island, especially in St. John's, and I think I was chatting with Julie about this earlier, as she understands, there is probably a couple of established populations here in the Corner Brook area as well. It is a non-native species, of course, being a European ant. And once ants are established, it's a very tricky thing to try to get rid of them. If that's your idea to control them, you would have to remove queens, and so it is a very tricky thing to do.
All right. Joe, thank you so much for this, and thank you for all the folks you brought along with you today.
Yep.
There is a public lecture today by Tom Chapman here at the Center for Research and Innovation. It's called Fluttering Through Life, Butterflies and Margaret Fontaine. So drop down. It's promising to be very animated.
Yep.
And on Saturday, there is a plan to have Bugs in the Park happening at Margaret Bowater Park in Corner Brook. So lots of opportunity to learn more about bugs. And that's all the time, of course, we have for The Signal today. Broadcasting live from Corner Brook, I'm Bernice Hillier.